Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Idea to Value podcast. Very happily coming to you from Sydney today, and I've got Nick White with me, who is going to talk to us about a very interesting innovation that's been in development at Deloitte. It's called Deloitte Assist. So Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Deloitte Assist actually is?
Sure. So Deloitte Assist, the genesis of the idea came from one of my colleagues' fathers passing away in hospital. It was an unfortunate situation, but we are both process consultants, and so the two of us were talking about the experience that he and his father had had while they were in hospital, the issues that they had seen in the environment, and how we could potentially support the nurses better in delivering care to patients. What Rob was concerned about was the environment that sits around nurses in hospitals impedes their ability to give care to patients when they're working so hard to give it. So how could we come up with something that would help them to deliver that care? So the solution itself is a innovation that starts to augment and hopefully one day replace the nurse call bell system, which at the moment is a physical button that you have to press. And the idea was that we replace that with a voice-based solution, that a patient who is potentially mobility impaired or a patient who may have fallen has the ability to actually use their voice to get help by activating a smart speaker, and we can capture that information and pass it through to a nurse, give the nurse contextual information at the time of receiving that notification, and that way they can then decide on a priority for whether they rush to the patient's aid or whether it's somebody just needing to change the TV channel and they can take a little more time. So the idea of the product really is, how do we augment the existing call bell system and provide contextual information to the nurse at the time that the patient makes the request.
I mean, that sounds like there's a lot of innovative technologies in use there. You mentioned voice control. How does it actually work in practice? Can you give us an example of how it might happen?
Yes, sure. So at the moment it's got a smart speaker, so we're using the Alexa product, so the Echo Dot. So you simply wake up the device using the wake word, and that device then starts listening to you. You speak to the device. You may say, I need a glass of water. We're able to use natural language processing, essentially speech to text in that instance, and extract from that phrase water. Once we've got that word water, we can pass that through to our systems and we can apply a set of business logic to that, assign a priority to it, and we can smart route it to the right person. So let's say we wanted a blanket or a pillow. The nurses in the ward can actually choose for that to be routed to a nurse's aide, a nurse's assistant, rather than the nurse themselves. So that allows us to alleviate some of the load from the nurses. So in simplicity, answering your question, patient speaks, we listen to that, capture a voice print, pass that up to the cloud, convert that into text, figure out which part of the text is what the patient actually wants using machine learning and AI, pass that through to some business logic, process the business logic, present it onto a dashboard and a mobile device for a nurse to respond to.
Wow.
And then respond back to the patient and say, we've heard you, we're on our way.
And that's obviously one of the most important aspects.
Oh, absolutely, because without confirmation that somebody has heard you, doubt creeps into your mind as to whether anybody's actually coming. And so either you press that call button again and again and again, or you try to help yourself, in which case it is the cause of a number of falls, where somebody does try to help themselves, tries to get to the bathroom, and in the case of Rob's father, has an accident on the way and falls.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I mean, that comes to maybe the history behind how it came about. It's one thing to know what an innovation is, but sometimes it's just as interesting to find out how it came to be.
Mm.
So can you give us a bit of insight about the journey that created Deloitte Assist?
Sure. So when we were originally having that conversation, we were thinking about how to give a piece of information that currently the nurses didn't have for them to understand the priority. That was our absolute first thing, and it still remains our number one thing that we're trying to solve.
So this wasn't a client coming to you saying, we want you to develop voice-based assistants using Alexa.
No. So I think probably if I go back even further, for Rob and I, we've both worked in process efficiency and optimization of business processes for many, many, many years. So naturally we were looking for things that we see in society that have some sort of breakdown, some sort of inefficiency about them, and thinking how can we apply something we've seen in another industry across into this situation. So for us in this situation was how can we help nurses know whether this is a high priority or a low priority? Because at the moment a bell just goes off, and if you think about behavioral psychology, if I'm doing a task and a bell goes off and I understand the priority of the task I'm doing but I don't understand the priority of that bell, I finish what I'm doing and then I go to the bell. And if I do that over and over again for 10, 20 years, I start to have tuning out that bell. I get alarm fatigue and I don't even hear it. And the nurses were the ones that came to us and said, that's what's happening. We cottoned onto that without really understanding alarm fatigue. But what we cottoned onto was, at the moment, they've got no idea whether that's an important request or a very low priority request. And as a result, they're all responded to with the same criticality in terms of action. What we wanted to do was we wanted to provide the nurse the information to say, I've got to run to this one, but I can take a few minutes before I get to this one.
Yeah, there's probably a difference between someone wanting water or needing help changing the TV channel and
that's it.
Being in pain or maybe even something more serious.
So with that as a very singular focus, we said that's what we want to solve. And then we started to realize, well, if we could solve that in a way that also improved the patient experience, improved the nurse's experience, helped manage the hospital in a more efficient manner, it would actually provide a benefit for a number of different stakeholders. So as we started to build out the solution to that problem, we started to go, that's actually going to benefit a whole lot of people. We went and socialised the idea internally first with a couple of people within Deloitte, and then we said, okay, let's go and speak to a CEO. So went to a CEO that we had a good relationship at one of the hospitals. He loved the idea. Our question to him was, have we found something that is actually a problem for you? Because if it's not a problem for you, we'll just put it on the shelf and go and do something else. But he said, no, I think this is something that really needs solving. And he got together about 20 of his nurses, brought them into a conference room, and we pulled together a very, very simple prototype. It took us about 2 weeks to develop. All you could say to it was, I've got pain in my neck. And it would come up saying neck pain and a time ticking down. And we showed that to the nurses, and there was a moment of stunned silence where they all looked at us and said, you can do that? And they started playing back to us the various use cases that they thought this technology could be used for. And from there, we started to build a very good relationship with them. And that became the beginnings of our MVP build. We actually worked with that group of nurses for about 3 months in a simulation hospital that they've got, and iterated the solution into what it is today.
Wow. So it sounds very much like the design thinking process.
Very much so, yeah.
You start out actually figuring out if there's a problem before you start developing any way of solving that problem.
Yeah. I think we had it in our mind that we needed to provide the nurse with that contextual piece of information, right? If you didn't know whether it's somebody's fallen or somebody's in pain or somebody needs help versus somebody with a TV, then the solution doesn't work. So then we had to go to, well, how do we get that information? And we've learned since there's somebody who's tried to solve that with buttons, so they've got 3 buttons rather than 1 button. Well, that's just complexity for the patient.
Yeah.
So I think it was serendipitous that at the time we were thinking about this problem, the voice technology was also taking off. You were starting to see massive uptake of both the Google Home and the Amazon Echo device. And so in our minds, we were thinking about, could we leverage that breakthrough in technology to solve this problem?
So was it a situation where you were assessing different potential ways of solving the problem, and you focused on trying voice to start with, or did you have a whole heap of different solutions like, I don't know, 3D scanning or extra buttons, and then you prioritized them all downwards to focus on voice?
No, I think we went to voice pretty quickly. We realized that, well, first of all, I should say, voice is not going to work for every patient. So we recognized that the solution that we have needs a multimodal input. For some patients who may have had a throat operation or who are mute and can't speak, having some sort of mobile interface to our solution is the future. But very quickly, I think we realized that the simplest and easiest way to enter this piece of information into our system was using your voice. And that's part of the attractiveness of it, is a patient who is mobility impaired in bed or somewhere around their room able to use their voice to ask for help.
And I think that comes to probably the most important part of the journey. What happened when it actually ended up being used with patients?
Well, it's a long journey to that point. It's long in my mind. It took us about probably 6 or 7 months to get to that point. We spent about 3 months developing the MVP, maybe 4, developing the MVP in the hospital, and got to a point where our voice recognition was probably at about 70%. And the key concern at that point in time was, we proved the technology can work. So we're comfortable that voice was going to be a viable solution, but we were cognizant that we needed to get above 90% before we were willing to put it in a patient scenario to make sure that we didn't have rejection by the users, because the solution just wasn't good enough in terms of voice recognition. And so we spent about 3 or 4 months working on the utterance model and tweaking the underlying solution just to get it to a point where we were hitting that 90 plus recognition. Interestingly enough, in our cycle, we saw the release of English US and English Australia for the Amazon Alexa devices. And there was a moment where we were at about 88% voice recognition through our testing. And that weekend they released the English Australia model, and we went from 88% to 94%.
Wow.
And so we saw that impact of accent in terms of voice recognition in a very, very measurable amount. So we know that you get somewhere between sort of 6 to 10 percentage points improvement when you're using an accent that the device is actually coded for. But what we've been able to do with our model is minimize that degradation you get associated with most accents. So if you're speaking English and you're not an English Australian speaker, you still get a pretty good response with most accents. I have to say, if you're from the Highlands of Scotland, it may have a difficulty in understanding you. But for most accents, we've been able to manage that quite well.
And what's been the response so far?
For the patients, so that was your question as well, which I didn't quite get to. But we eventually got to the point where we rolled it into our first hospital. And in our first hospital, let's just talk about the very first 4 weeks that we rolled the solution out. Over that period of time, we were rolling out beds each week. So it wasn't a full month of a full ward. But by the end of it, we were rolled out to the full ward, which is about 30 beds in a ward. And we had about 400 requests through the month. At the end of the month, we did a number of different patient feedback surveys and nurse surveys. 100% of the patients said that next time they come to hospital, they would want a room with Deloitte Assist in it.
Oh, wow.
92% net promoter score, just from a pure net promoter score question. And 83% of the nurses said that they believe this improved their ability to care for patients. At that point in time, measuring the data for our median response time was, we still had a lot of people learning how to use the system. So we were seeing data that was indicating to us that we were going to see a reduction in response time. Took us another couple of months to sort of bed that change down for that first hospital. We're much better at it now. But now we're sort of under 5 minutes compared to an industry benchmark of 10.5 minutes.
Wow.
Nurse response time. So we're about 50% down in terms of response time. We want to get it down to 70% of the industry benchmark. So we want to get down to about 3 minutes. The difference, though, is what we're seeing for critical requests is critical requests are getting responses in seconds. So we had our 2000th request in that hospital just recently, and it was a 23-second response time to a help request.
Wow.
So we really are having the impact we wanted to have, which was, I know what's critical, I know what's not, I'll respond fast to what's critical. But interestingly, I'll respond faster to things that are non-critical because they've got that context about what the patient's asking for.
I mean, that's amazing. It really shows that something you might think that 6 or 7 months to implement something is feels like very long, but for many companies, hearing about something that's quite groundbreaking, that's very fast to get from the initial development idea to actual practical application of it.
I think the power of the team here in terms of our focus, we're extremely outcome focused. And recognise that in an organisation like ours, the idea has to get up and running pretty quickly. Otherwise, we're going to lose the interest of our stakeholders. And so for us, we had a very limited amount of time to get the product stood up. So there was a very clear focus on what is MVP and making sure that we built that MVP to a standard that it was able to be used by a patient. So that was the core focus for the sort of that first 3 months and then bedding it down over that second 3 months. The engagement with that hospital has been fantastic because they recognised that we were at MVP stage and they said, we'd love to engage you and be your first hospital. And we allowed sort of a 6-month period, we would iterate the solution a number of times. And so we have done that. We've done 3 releases with them. And they've been intimately involved in scoping and designing those releases before we've rolled them out to them. So we've improved the sound that the nurses get. So one of the first complaints were these devices aren't loud enough. Can we make them louder?
Okay.
So we created a new sound for them. We custom built escalation with them. So we knew that it wasn't part of the MVP, how the solution did escalation, and we actually designed that with them as part of their use of the solution.
I mean, it's been fantastic seeing within Deloitte the response to Deloitte Assist. I know that we've won some industry innovation recognition for it. It's been highlighted a lot internally as well. But I also know that in a lot of companies, especially some people who work day-to-day delivering client outcomes, some organizations might not think that investing time into something that isn't delivering revenue immediately, it's a bit of a risky thing to be doing. So what do you think was required at Deloitte to actually get the support for people to develop this and to make it happen?
Yeah. Look, we've got an executive team in the business that is very aspirational in their ideas about the impact that Deloitte will have in the marketplace, and that's an inspirational thing to work within that frame of reference. So for a lot of the people here, we're often thinking about how can we be doing something that has a disproportionate impact, and so very much thinking about how can the work we do impact as many people as possible. One of the things we've got is a partnership with Singularity University, and that's all about thinking about that disproportionate impact, that exponential impact that we can have on the world. So one of the views we've got is how do we change the lives of millions of people? One of the projects at Deloitte at the moment is how do we impact 50 million lives? So those sorts of ways of thinking they're just embedded within our leadership teams and our executive team. So when we brought an idea like this to the team and said, listen, this is something that we'd like to do, we'd like to investigate, they were open already to that idea of testing out an idea like this to see if it had legs. So we were able to get some initial small amount of funding just to tide us over, just while we investigated the idea. And once that hospital came on board saying they wanted to do the MVP development with us, that further reinforced that belief. And the firm decided that they saw the possibilities of the solution and that they were willing to invest some money and some of our people's time. So it was really about having that innovation culture, that desire to impact the world, and then that ability of the executive to get a few of us and put us in a room and protect us a little bit from other work that was going on, and put faith into us that we could build something that was worthwhile.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Nick, it's been wonderful speaking with you. If people do want to find out more about Deloitte Assist, what's the best way they should do that?
The simplest way is probably to search Deloitte Assist on Google, and that should bring you through to our website. There is a Deloitte Assist page that you can go to on Deloitte.com. So if you fail through the Google method, just go to Deloitte.com and search for Deloitte Assist within Deloitte.com, and that should bring you there. Otherwise, reach out to me. My details are available through the website.
Perfect. Nick, thanks so much for being with us today.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please like, share and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what you thought and what you'd like to see more about. If you want to take your creativity and innovation capabilities to the next level, then invest in yourself with the premium training only available at ideatovalue.com. These exclusive training modules have all been put together by me, Nick Skillicorn, and have been used by thousands of artists, innovation leaders and CEOs to become better at understanding the source of their creativity and executing on their innovation ambitions. And there is no risk to you, as they're backed by our money-back guarantee. Now, don't forget to go out there and make your ideas a reality. See you again soon.